to share some of our experiences and how we think about it and all the different ways that we found it to be impactful, and take with it what works for you and jettison the stuff that doesn't. So what makes a meaningful measure, or what makes a measure meaningful? And I just, it's the same question with just a different placement of words. And I really want us to really focus on what makes a measure meaningful. And I guess the other thing that's kind of part and parcel to all this is, I'll go back, what's part and parcel to all this as well is the fact that we can, of course, measuring stuff is not a problem most of the time. Measuring meaningful stuff, different. So again, just to comment on that, the maturity of an organization to move from reporting on and measuring some stuff to actually measuring meaningful stuff does take some time. So let's to move up the maturity, get ourselves to a stack of meaningful measures. So with that in mind, here are some musts. And I just got the internet connections unstable. So Ryan, you'll let me know if my audio is not working conveniently. Okay, so 5 musts to make measures meaningful. Measures must be a result that is core to an organization's success. It needs to be core. It needs to be something that you can impact. It needs to be a driver of your business, and of course, business organization, I'm using that a bit interchangeably. And we need to be able to measure it frequently so that we can trend it. And it needs to be a result that you must deliver on. So a little of these are duplicative, but I wanted to really make that point in the context of it has to be core to your success, and it needs to be a must that you need to deliver on. So really think about that when I'm thinking about evaluating like the brainstorm of measures that are developed as part of a strat planning process. These are the checklists that I use, or maybe I'll simplify this a little bit, but just to have that up on the whiteboard and really use it as a guideline for us to be a bit more judicious and critical of our measures and really focusing on measures that matter. So I always find it's really helpful to have these types of checklists too, because that allows everybody to brainstorm and then safely, remove those that might not be the ones that are as impactful as they could be. So I should also say, everybody, by the way, please note that I would love your questions. So please make sure you put your questions in chat. We'll take them as we go. So don't leave me hanging if there's something we're talking about that you want to dig into more. So one of the driving questions I always ask is, what is the business or customer impact we must deliver? So what is the business or customer impact we must deliver? And that's just, that anchors, that just simplifies this whole bunch of stuff down into one really important anchoring question. And that's been really awesome to help teams really focus on the impact and really get us to measures that matter. So again, I love driving questions. This is a great driving question. So let's take just a minute. I would love to just get some ideas going in chat. Let's just crowdsource for just a second. Will you put into chat a meaningful measure that you're using today? And one of your, doesn't even matter what, we're working in all kinds of different organizations. So a meaningful measure that I have found is sales conversion rate. That's a super meaningful measure. Employee pulse scores is a meaningful measure. Looking for stuff here. ENPS, yep. So employee NPS, lead conversion, awesome. What are some other meaningful measures, everybody? There's almost 80 of us. Yep, and yep, net promoter score, awesome, Kristen, thank you. CO2 reduction by customers, fantastic. New investment success, OTIF, on time in full. Okay, very cool. Measures of how we serve our B2B customers, customer growth and percentage, click to open rates, yep. average transaction value, customer returns, downtime, growth of services. Awesome. Customer success measures, but make them more specific. Yep. Retention rates, social engagement rates. Okay, fantastic. How about a few more? Anybody else? You know what I love about all these that everybody just shared is no one put financial measures in. So we'll talk about leading and lagging measures, but financial measures are obviously important, but love cash conversion rate. Okay, fantastic, Scott, thank you. And profitability. Okay, Jody, yep. Customer engagement management, cool, yep, fantastic. So, one of the things, and just love to see a few more, one of the things that I always like to share with people is the difference between really meaningful measures like NPS, right? Net promoter score, like lead conversion, like average transaction values, versus measures that are glam metrics. So think about just having that in your mind. Sometimes metrics are glam metrics. They make us feel good, like website traffic, but they don't necessarily mean that they're business drivers. So that's just been something that we've been really focused on a lot. Just because we can measure it doesn't mean it matters. And sometimes glam metrics makes us feel good, but it's not necessarily driving the business. So that's why on one of my musts is it must be a business driver. So one of my tips coming out of here today is myth bust those glam metrics, those metrics that are not actually driving your business. And sometimes it takes time to figure out whether they're business drivers or not. Okay, everybody, let's do this one more time. How about recent experiences with not measures that were not meaningful? So you were like, oh my gosh, why on earth did I even think about allowing that as a measure? So one of my recent examples that I had up there is number of public meetings. Like, I have no idea why we decided to measure that, but that has not been helpful. I do mean busy metrics. Yes, Jody, awesome. Oh, best places to work. Kristen, very interesting. So you found that not to be a meaningful measure. I'm going to put a little pin in that because that would be really fun to come talk about if we have time at the end of today or the third Thursday. Negative profit margin. Okay. How about some other measures, everybody, that you found were like really not helpful? Number of transactions completed. Okay, perfect. Real revenue versus budgeted revenue. Okay. Yep. Promoting remote work. Leads generated does not say anything about the potential. Yeah, Jan, that's awesome. Exactly right. So that's an example of a measure that can be a bit of a glam metric that is it's interesting, but doesn't necessarily tell us about what's what the possibilities are. Anything that's not smart. Yep, that's right, Tommy. That's really important to event participants, etc. Okay, awesome. So what I think is interesting about this too, and just to comment, and anything else, keep it going, everybody, but just to comment, oftentimes volume-based metrics, number of participants, number of transactions, number of public meetings, etc., is interesting to know about organizational capacity, but isn't necessarily interesting in terms of a measure that's meaningful. So that's just a thing. Sometimes I'll let those go because we just need to get momentum with a team. But oftentimes we'll find that those are just glam metrics and not totally meaningful. So again, just a little bit of a reminder there and a tip. The other thing to talk about is we always can make a measure move towards meaningful when we create a ratio of something, when it's X of Y. So consider that as well. So sometimes number of transactions to failed transactions, now there's something that's interesting there, right? Number of transactions to on-time delivery, is more interesting. So that starts to make things a little bit more meaningful if those are drivers of the business. So, and yes, Jody, that whole point about setting a baseline, obviously we'll get there as well. So, not only just having a measure that's meaningful, but then how we set the target that's meaningful is the other piece of that as well. So, and baselines are part of that. Fantastic. Here we go. Thank you for that. Super fun. I'm just going to do some level setting on some definitions really quickly. Measures, metrics, I'm using that word interchangeably. That is the thing we're measuring. That is the set of words that we're measuring. So I'll just use Net Promoter Score, NPS, as an example. That is the measure. So number of returning customers is the measure compared to last month. Okay, that makes it more interesting. The target, of course, is the thing that we're aiming for. It is a numeric value. The number, a currency, a percentage. So that's the, targets are stated in numeric terms. So it's important that we differentiate between the thing we're measuring and what we're shooting for, if you will, or the numeric value. So just again, to be very precise about that. KPIs, or key performance indicators, or key performance measures, or any other verbiage you want to throw to that, right? Is of the sea of measures, those quantifiable outcomes that express the health of an organization, the health and success. So that's my 5 musts, right? That will get you to KPIs. Ideally, the basket of measures that are key performance indicators are holistic across an organization, and they are critical to keeping the pulse of an organization's performance. So we'll dig more into that. But if we were to say there's a sea of measures, and KPIs are those handful that are absolutely about the health and success of an organization. And then just confuse us a little bit more. We talk a lot on this in Strategy Collaborative about OKRs, about objectives and key results. Objectives and key results are a strategy execution tool. And the key results piece of this can be a little bit confusing. So of course, the key results are the basket of measures, the basket of key results, but the basket of measures to achieve an objective. And sometimes we will cherry pick some key results as KPIs. So I'm going to talk more about this, but I just want to, this is all of the craziness with all, not only acronyms, but also how all of this gets really confusing. And our job is to make it simple. So I'm going to make it simple, but these are the definitions that we're working with today. Okay, so here we go. I want to just comment for a second is with OKRs and KPIs, it can be really confusing. And so let's keep it simple. I am going to make this really overly simple. For those of us that are really deep into OKRs, there's a whole chapter in Measure What Matters about this. So dig in. I'm not going to get that deep. But just suffice it to say, we are going to say that KPIs are special key results. They work together, and they are cherry-picked key results that are absolutely those success measures that indicate the health and success of an organization. And ideally, they're spread out through your plan, so we have a holistic set of measures. So I like to think about KPIs as almost like, you hit the button and you do a query. You have your plan, you have your key results, and you've tagged some of them as key performance indicators across the perspectives of your plan. We'll talk more about this in a minute too. And if you were to click a button, right, you get a nice KPI scorecard, and we'll show that a little bit as well. But that's the way to think about key performance indicators. And I would just argue that the energy to put into identifying good KPIs is worth its weight in gold. So just to say that as well. So we'll talk more about that, but that's just to differentiate just a little bit. All right, here's a couple of examples just to make concrete my my hand gestures. So here's an example of an objective. These are similar objectives we've used before. And we are just continuing to use examples. I have other examples, but these 2 examples are still using the objectives and key results methodology because a lot of us are using it. So, and it can be awfully confusing. So that's why I'm bringing it together. So in this case, there's an objective about automating and standardizing, and there's 4 key results. These are the key results we need to drive in order to achieve automation and standardization. So you can see the first key result I've tagged as a KPI. It is a key performance indicator that is quantifiable, that tells us the health of the organization broadly, but specifically also for this objective, reaching an average of X operating expense per staff, moving it down from Y. So that's a great key performance indicator, assuming it's important to this company. And then you can see the other KRs. These other KRs are more effort-based. They are not quant-based, but they're very important to moving forward this objective. And the basket of those key results make that objective possible. So then you can see those other ones. But again, just to think about how we're bringing together key results and KPIs. One more example, this objective is about new donors. So again, I have 3 key results here. 2 of them are, we could argue they could be a little bit more, they could be better key results. That's okay, those first 2, but they're campaigns, they're effort-based. And then the third key result is about new donors. And I have a precise metric there, and that's a really important, I just tagged that as a KPI. So again, just to see how all of that is coming together. So with that, I'm going to jump us to another, just to share a few more perspectives on this as well. So leading and lagging. This is your classic balance scorecard for perspectives. We talked a little bit about this on a previous collaborative, but we're throwing a lot of this together right now. So we have OKRs, KPIs, balance scorecard. That can be a lot. So again, just to simplify, one of the benefits of the balance scorecard thinking is to make sure that we have leading and lagging metrics and we're being holistic. Most of the time, our leading indicators are those indicators that are helping us, that are the warning buoys or the early indicators, the drivers of outcome-based results, which would be our financial perspective. So oftentimes our people, our process, and our customer can be a little bit of a mixed bag, but most of the time our internal and our people are leading indicators. There are often some leading indicators in customer. We can also have some lagging ones, and always financial perspective is lagging. So that's just a way to think about making sure that we have, when we are thinking about KPIs, that we have a balanced view, not only of the perspectives, but also leading and lagging. Okay, I'm going to pause for a second. So I am going to just look at a couple of questions here and see if I can take some and bring them in. So Luis, I'm just going to read your question out for a second. We want to separate KPIs and OKRs from our variable compensation model in order to make a clearer view of today's results, KPIs, and the long-term strategy achievement, OKRs. Is this a good or bad practice? Okay, I'm going to read that one more time. Sorry, because there's a lot. That's a big question, and I would love other people's feedback on this too. And you can just slam it in the chat. We want to separate KPIs and OKRs from our variable comp model in order to make a clearer view of today's results, KPIs, and the long-term achievement, OKRs. Is this a good or bad practice? So the best practice on OKRs is that you don't tie compensation to OKRs. Obviously, we do need to tie compensation to something. And if you're tying them to KPIs, that seems like the right thing to do. So that would be my answer. I'm also only have one opinion. So if you have another alternative thought on that, I would love some feedback. Christy, go ahead.
Erica, can you go back to the slide where you had, I think it was the objective? Because I think one more, the first example, I think many of us are using different terminologies. So for example, if I look at example 1, objective, let's just say this was a departmental goal.
Yep.
Your KR1s, I would define those as individual goals or objectives. So I think we're trying to do the same thing, but maybe we have different terminology. I'm obviously in the HR world. So based on our platform, what we're using for performance management, we have it set up in such a way where essentially, we're cascading. So we may have the overall company strategic goals, long-term goals, break it down, departmental goals, break those down. How are we achieving those departmental goals, which is our individual performance goals, objectives, tasks, activities. From there, we're using KPIs to say, how are we doing, right? How are we measuring all those goals that are set up on a quarterly basis? So that's, I think, where I'm finding a little bit of a struggle is, are you making a recommendation like your KRs have to be set up with this, or it's okay about the terminology. Does that make sense?
I think it's okay about the terminology. Yep.
Okay.
And I think more importantly that we together walk out of today with the idea of how do we sharpen our practice of meaningful measures, no matter where they live.
Okay.
So you have a specific model that you're using, and I imagine other folks do as well. And I would love actually on the third Thursday to unpack all of that, because there is so many different ways to put this together, no doubt about it.
Okay.
And to your point, thank you for sharing that too. And we probably would need to see that as a diagram as well, right? Is just to think about all of these pieces and how they come together and be really thoughtful about where we're measuring.
Mm-hmm.
And I am taking this from an organizational perspective just for a minute. And then, and then adding the next layer of complexity on that is absolutely the, there you are, Christy, is absolutely the cascading or aligning, right? Because there are also a lot of us on the call that are like, well, we don't cascade anymore, we align. Okay, so that's a whole nother a way to approach this. So just to kind of lay waste to all this, and that's where I kind of commented at the beginning, can be a little technical. If you have a model that's working in your organization, do not change it. What we always can do is help our teams make measures more meaningful, no matter where they live. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. And also depending short-term, long-term goals. So it gets, like you said, the complexity of how we're measuring and making any adjustments based on where we are within. So yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Fantastic. Thank you. And Sanjay, I see you have your hand up. Let's take your question, then we'll keep rolling.
Yeah, my question was regarding critical success factors and how they tie to KPIs. But before that, I just wanted to comment on this. Perhaps it ties to, as Christy was saying about departmental, right? This could be at the organizational level, and as part of the cascading, you could have a shared OKR tied to this, and this may be tied directly to performance management, as you're saying. Having a process that is going to be automated, so it ties to the actual organizational objectives, but is something that your department, HR folks are focusing on, might sort of help enable an alignment also among various departments in the organization and tying to the corporate or company objectives.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, that's totally true. So I think, sorry, and we'll add one more piece of terminology into this. Sanjay, as you were asking about critical success factors, right?
Yeah.
So for everybody on the call, and for me, quite frankly, how are you defining critical success factors?
I'm still trying to figure that out, how it ties, because the term is used around, and I see more that as the enabler to getting to the KPIs, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I could. Yep, I could see that too. Yep, that's cool. I could see that definition working for sure. Maybe I would just say, and this is just for everybody, I think what really confuses folks is all of the 3-letter acronyms.
Yeah.
So maybe no matter what you're doing is to eliminate one of them, or at least redefine it so it's a little easier. So you could also call those success drivers, or if that's the definition that you're using for that. So right. So Sanjay, I think that makes all the sense. My only caution would just I think it's really hard to use KPIs, OKRs, CFS. That's a lot. And so I would, okay, cool. And then also I would just say, if you're not using OKRs, that, you're using something else, there's a million ways to name these things. That's totally cool. So just a comment on that too. So kind of back on where we're rolling with this, everybody, is our goal would be to say, no matter how we're configuring all this, there's always the opportunity to make measures more meaningful. And so let's make sure that we're okay, how do we help teams make measures more meaningful? So here we go. And then I guess the other thing to comment on too is if you have something going on in your organization that's working for you, don't mess it up. I'm going to approach the next bit of conversation, or at least the way that I've got this structured, is specifically at the corporate level, specifically at the organizational level. For you, the organization might be a department. That's cool. But let's just agree for just a sec. I'm just talking about the top of whatever it is that you're planning for, which of course is not where this stops, but just to kind of like at least box this in a little bit, right? So just a comment is some choices that need to be made, or a structure that needs to be thought through, is there's different levels of measures, and sometimes we over measure. And so it's really important to decide as the strategist for your organization. And again, I'm taking this from a corporate perspective, where the measures are living. And yes, you can have measures living in departments and teams, of course, right? But I'm talking about the corporate level. And so I'm going to share a couple of different examples here just to unpack this a bit more. So sometimes we have, and again, I am talking about those key performance indicators, those key measures of success for an organization. Sometimes we'll have them live at the top of the plan, and I'm going to call for this example strategic goals. So just that's the top of the plan. Sometimes they live at the objective level, so that would be one layer deeper. Sometimes they live at the key results layer and they roll up. And so when I'm just suggesting that you're clear about where your measures live. And honestly, many of us have built plans with all of these different components. It's, however, important not to do all of them at the same time. So that's, again, my caution. So let's just walk through some examples here. So here's an example of what I mean. So this is an example of an organization, the strategic goal. So there's 4 strategic goals in this organization. This one happens to be an employee wellness goal. So that is the top of the plan. And then there's a handful, it happens to be law enforcement actually. There's a handful of key indicators, they call them, or KPIs, success measures, that are the basket of measures they are using to indicate the progress of their goal. And then they have initiatives to execute the how. So the success measures are independent from the initiatives, but together all of that makes up the progress of the strategic goal. So that's just, again, that's one example of really being clear about the architecture of your plan and where your success measures live. So that's one example. So here's another example. This is really common. Most of us build plans this way, actually. And so again, the goal is the top level. In this case, this happens to be a Boys and Girls Club, actually. And the goal is to increase our reach. And then, of course, the next layer of the plan, and again, this is really common, like most of us build plans this way, where there is a thing. In this case, there's the objective, donors, and a very specific measurable that's tied to that objective. There's 5 objectives and they all have measurables. Some of them are better than others. And that's, again, really common way to build a plan. So a different structure. And then I just want to pause for a second. So what I just wanted to get in our minds is just to say, when, building this plan, we were clear that the overall organizational performance is being communicated at this level here. Okay, great. And so then if you're implementing OKRs, you're doing it a little bit, one layer even deeper. And we're saying, okay, so we've got our strategic goal. We have 3 objectives, and our key results are here. And a handful of those key results we've identified, you saw this before, a handful of key results we have identified as KPIs. So again, I'm just wanting to unpack that. So we're just really being deliberate about the type of plans that we're building, where the measurability is living. You might have measurability living somewhere else, but these were just 3 common examples that we see often in terms of thinking about, again, where measurability lives and where organizational performance of the overall strategy is living. So I'm going to pause on that. Hopefully that's helpful. And Lauren, I am saying to pick like one of those 3, that I just shared. you can combine some of these, but it gets really confusing. And I think one of the things that is the biggest challenge in our work is it's confusing. We measure too much stuff. We make plans confusing. We add a lot of 3-letter acronyms, and then nobody understands what we're doing, right? And so, like, we can technically like do all sorts of different stuff, but my recommendation would be just to pick a lane. Allow the, I do allow the exploratory process to happen. When we're running strategic planning processes for organizations, I don't necessarily go in with a like an opinion about what to do. I do let the process unfold, and then kind of just to like figure out then like where is it best fitted? Where are we going to identify the success measures for an organization? I'm just using that loosely, and then build the plan accordingly. So I'm going to pause for a second and just take a breath, but also say, we talk a lot about the monthly and quarterly cadence of managing organizational performance. That is what is the heartbeat of our work and how strategy really turns into results. And the power of great monthly and quarterly reviews are that we have measures that are meaningful, and we clearly have a structure that we're talking about, in this case, this goal and these 3 objectives. And the most meaningful part of those conversations are those bolded items there that let us know whether we are moving forward effectively. When we don't have good, meaningful measures, the whole thing just kind of, it starts to become really flat. And so again, that's why I'm just impressing upon us, forcing ourselves to really get better at meaningful measures. So with that, I'm going to move us along unless there's any questions to throw into chat. I'm going to share this one slide. I think this is going to be a little bit confusing. So I'm just going to call out to everybody on the call that's doing OKRs for a second. So, and again, we can dig deeper on the 3rd Thursday, but if you're not doing OKRs, just ignore everything I'm saying for 2 seconds. Okay. But if you're doing OKRs, please note that most of the time your key results roll up to a % complete non-measurable objective. That is the standard methodology of OKRs. Sometimes we find that a little too restrictive. And so sometimes we like to make our objectives quantifiable, even if we're using the key results methodology. So again, if you're not using OKRs, ignore what I'm saying. If you are, you're tracking with me. And I want to comment on the fact that one of the things that's really important is to be clear, if you are using the by the book OKR methodology and you're rolling up the performance of key results to a % complete, you need to be clear about where those quantifiable measures live. Sometimes they live outside of it. Sometimes they live inside your OKR stack. So yeah, and by roll up, sure, no problem. What I mean by that is the % of progress of this key result and this key result and this key result gets averaged and rolled up to the overall performance of an objective. That's the OKR methodology. So that's what I mean by roll up. And the reason I'm calling this out is because that methodology is very clear, very strong. And it's important that in tandem to that, as strategists, we are clear about where our quantifiable key performance indicators are living. And again, sometimes they live within this, and sometimes they live as a standalone scorecard, but it really matters that we're clear about that. So, and I am not having a conversation about compensation. I'm talking about specifically organizational performance. Cool. Whew. I told you it would be technical, everybody, so I apologize, but I just want to I love that we're all with this. So fantastic. I just want to also comment on the fact that our job is to change the conversation in our monthly and quarterly strategics to what happened to what's next. So this happens to be an example of our dashboard that we use. Everybody, whatever system you're using, it's all good. I would just comment that what you really want to be able to see is the specific performance indicator, right? Whatever that happens to be. And again, I subscribe to the philosophy that measures don't move themselves. We have to do things to like drive results, right? And it's nice to know what we're doing to drive the results. So when I'm facilitating, when we're facilitating a monthly or quarterly strategic, and many of the applications do this, we need to know where we are against the goals that we've set for ourselves, of course, but also what are we actually doing to drive performance? And if you just happen to come off mute, if you wouldn't mind going back on mute, that'd be great. What specific prioritized projects, initiatives are in flight to drive the performance? So again, the reason I'm saying this is because your Power BI dashboards or all of the dashboards that exist in the world are fantastic, but what you really want to be able to see is what are we doing to drive the performance of the organization, and where are we against the goals that we set for ourselves, not only on a quarterly basis, but also on a monthly basis and an annual basis and year to date. Like we want to be able to see all those views, because sometimes it's monthly, sometimes it's quarterly, sometimes it's year to date. So again, just to think about the fact that we need to make sure that we are able to have a conversation about what's next. This happens to be on target, so we're good. But if we weren't, we want to know why and what we need to do about it. And then this was just an example of a KPI scorecard. This isn't all that fancy, but what I wanted to call out here is just that notion of when we pull our key performance indicators together, like, if we were to do a view, we want to be able to have a handful of measures in the various perspectives: people, growth, what do I have going on here? Products and services, operational excellence. So this particular plan has tons of key results. I don't even know how many cascaded actually down a level, in fact, but the specific key performance indicators or success indicators, or those that are absolutely drivers of the business, these are them. Yes, I do have revenue in here, but a lot of these are absolutely leading indicators to the overall performance of the organization. So again, just to kind of share a bit how all of that comes together. So we promised to be practical. I just have a couple more slides. I wanted to share this, and this might be something you steal it. That's the whole point. Use it, morph it, make it better. I'll walk it through, but I was wanting to give everybody a tool to say, how can we help facilitate creating measures that matter, or help us create measures that are impactful? And so I just said, okay, well, I always like to create Mad Libs, to create fill in the blanks for people, to give us like a way to create the thing. So, what is it that we're impacting? What is it? So obviously you would do this for every measure, right? But what is it we're trying to impact? So these are just some options. Normally it's a result for a stakeholder. It's a business or an expansion. It's an innovation. It's a efficiency or effectiveness. So I just put this example down here for a second. So I'll talk about the example in a minute, but what are we impacting? Who are we impacting? So that's just kind of a list of potential people we're impacting, who we're impacting, right? How will we actually state the results? So that really gets us to this notion of, yes, number of, I listed that there, but that's kind of not the best, right? So this is the notion of different ways to think about how we state the results. And then what's the degree of change that's expected? So if we stitch this together, we start to have measures that are more impactful. So it would sound like this. So what are we impacting? So this is just something this is personal, right? So results of our current clients using our services. So I'm going to pause on this for a second. When I was putting this example together, I first started with customer satisfaction. And I was like, okay, well, that's okay, I guess. And then I wrote utilization of our application, right? And I was like, well, that's kind of okay. And then I thought, well, what really are we trying to impact? Well, what we're really trying to impact is our clients' results, right? That's actually what we're trying to do. So I thought, okay, well, that's a better the so what got me a little closer to a better meaningful measure, right? For who? Our current clients. Okay, cool. And what is the result we're trying to get to? We happen to want our clients to reach 80% of their goals. That's kind of the thing that we really focus on. And I would like us to do a better job than last year. So I'd like to see us like twice as many of our current customers achieving this result. So, what are we impacting, and really digging into that a bit more. Who are we impacting? What result is it we're trying to achieve, and how do we state it? And then what's the degree of change? That kind of makes our measures a little more interesting than number of public engagements. Now all of a sudden we're getting a little bit more meaningful. So hopefully this is a little bit helpful in the context of just giving you a tool to help you facilitate creating measures that are meaningful. I'm seeing a few questions up here. So let's see. Taffy saying 3 to 5. Yeah, I love that too, Taffy. I'm totally with you on that. Sometimes it's hard. And I find sometimes when we say 3 to 5, we're already limiting like what we brainstorm. So oftentimes we'll brainstorm, they'll put up our little checklist, right, of like what makes a meaningful measure from the first part of our talk today, and then like whittle it down. So I'm with you on that. I also think one of the things from Kaplan and Norton is the idea of knowing that you're going to start creating really meaningful measures, and you're going to end up changing a lot of them as you get more mature and realize they're not telling you as much as you would like. So allowing for that process to happen, I think, is really important as well. So, okay, so here we go. A bunch of cool stuff in chat there too. I'm just watching the clock. I just want to drop in a couple other ideas for you to prompt. So the other thing that's working really well is to shift our thinking from output to outcomes. So if you've been on other collaboratives, we've been talking a lot about that. So, there's a whole list of stuff here. You'll get the slides afterwards. So I'm not going to read this all, but just that notion of moving from task to value. So somebody put in chat a while ago, some of the key results that you saw on the previous slide felt like tasks. And sometimes some of them are tasks. Sometimes it's really hard to get like a stack of key results that are all value and outcome based. We try to get there. It doesn't always work. But this is the really good sort of prompter in getting us from outputs to outcomes. So again, just some other stuff to really help prompt. So here we go. Awesome stuff in chat as well, by the way. Here is a quick quality checklist. We could probably add a lot more to this based on a lot of the feedback we got, which I really appreciate. But a couple of things that are important, and this is sort of obvious, but I love to make sure we're starting with the end in mind. So the end in mind is to have a practice of managing our performance and managing our strategy on a monthly and quarterly basis. If we're going to have meaningful measures, we need to be able to report on them at least monthly. I know that's sort of obvious, but that's pretty important. I'd like to just put a big asterisk there. I think that sometimes if we put that up as like the first requirement to a meaningful measure, we shut down thinking, and we don't want to do that, of course. And so I'll often brainstorm, use my checklist of the 5 must-dos that we shared earlier, and then come back around and find out if we have data sources. If we don't have data sources for a really good measure, I'll often create a proxy. So what is a cheater set of measures, a cheater set of data that we can create until we have an actual data source? So just something to think about. Happy to share more about that on the third Thursday, but we need to have data sources. We have to set targets. So we actually really need to set monthly, quarterly, and annual targets. So just to comment, not just annual. It says nice to have quarterly, monthly, but really they're pretty important. We need to have an owner of the measure. Again, I don't believe that measures move themselves. That's just my opinion. And so, it's helpful not just have a data owner, but actually have the if you're using the RACI or DACI model, like be accountable, right, to the measure. And yeah, Erasmo, I think, or somebody asked just now, what do I mean by 2 or 3 make or breaks? So that's a term of art from another consultant, but it's nice to consider the fact that there are probably 1 or 2 measures, there are 1 or 2 success indicators in your organization or the organizations that you're consulting that are absolutely critical to the health and vitality. So an example would be if you are running a professional services organization, probably one of your make or breaks is billable utilization. We might not like that. It's not super fancy, but oftentimes if we're not using our resources to get work out the door to our clients, if we're a standard professional services organization that's not tech enabled, billable utilization is an example of a make or break. There's probably other make or breaks like that out there for you as well, and it's really important to identify those measures that are absolutely like those make or breaks, those indicators of the health and vitality of an organization. So hopefully that helps. Start small, allow change. So I just noted that. And then nice to have leading, lagging. And then somebody said this earlier, but we absolutely, in order for our measures to be meaningful, we need to be comparing it to something else, to a previous period, to a benchmark that's an industry benchmark. If we don't have any of that, we need to start creating that base. But it doesn't help us if there's got to be a comparable somewhere. So again, that's a make or break. So that's not a make or break. Excuse me. That's a nice to have versus a must have. So okay, that was a lot, everybody. So I'm just going to pause for a second and say, I would love to continue this conversation and workshop it more on the third Thursday. So join the pro group if that's something you want to dig into. This is very technical. There's a lot of different ways to do this. And again, I would just impress upon everybody, our job, no matter how you do it, is to know that if we don't have a handful of meaningful measures at the organizational level or the department level or the team level, whatever it is that you're planning for, the rest of all of what we're doing just starts to lose its energy and its importance and its meaning. And we really can't deliver on creating impact and momentum in organizations if we don't have meaningful measures. So, and I would just argue too, there's no right way to do this. There's just confused executive teams. So, you're doing it right when the executive team is not confused. So good on everybody on however you're configuring it. And then if you have a way that you're doing it that you would like to share, that's really working and driving performance in organizations that you're working with or that you're leading, we would love to showcase your work. And we can sanitize it because stuff's confidential, no problem. But just a big, please send us an email at collaborative@onstrategy.hq, because we would love to show different models because we're all about that. So, and there was a lot of awesome stuff in chat too, just about all of this as well. So, and Christy, maybe you'd be willing to share the model that you verbally shared with us too. So. We'll stay on for just a couple of minutes afterwards. I know there's a couple of questions here, but I just want to end on time. So here's the calendar, everybody. There's the dates for the rest of the third Thursdays. We're dark the first week of July, and then you can see what's coming in August. And then September, we asked what you want to talk about. So there were some ideas that came in. So now we've got some ideas about what's on your mind. So thank you so much for that. So with that, have an amazing rest of the week. Friday, a long weekend. Maybe think less, work less, and have some fun. And thank you always for being here. Everybody is so awesome. You're making a huge difference in the organizations you're working with. So thank you. I will officially say we're closing the meeting. So hop if you need to. If there is a question or two that was in chat that you want to tackle, we'll hang out for 5 or 10 minutes. So thanks, everybody. So let's see. And Ryan is saying, yes, there is a post-session collaborative email coming your way. Absolutely. Taffy, you asked a question. Team, department, program, unit, individual measures should all roll up to support C-suite KPIs. So when creating them, ask why and why does the measure matter? Yeah, man, if we can link all that stuff together, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, that falls into alignment. because a lot of times you have the department managers talking to their directors who are talking to the C-suite, and things kind of get muddled. And then you have the C-suite wondering why the individual teams or what have you aren't actually measuring their KPI. And it's because at that level, it does not make sense. So you can have all the levels that we've talked about here, but they roll up into each other to actually support. So what I have, like when I have frontline staff creating a little project, something they want to improve upon, you start with why. And then they'll start to talk about, like I'm in healthcare, so they'll start to talk about how this certain thing impacts the patient. So we're looking at quality of care, and we're also looking at patient satisfaction, which are two of the big pillars. But what posting on a board, I have them use the it's either a C for care, or it's a P for patient satisfaction. And that way you don't have to be standing next to their board to know what that particular unit is supporting in their improvement.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you see the numbers rise.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really doable when when you have teams like you have, which can have a consistent measure across an organization, which is fantastic. Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Cool.
But even the frontline staff are, they support fiscal responsibility, and they support community.
Absolutely.
And it's just showing them how they support that.
That's right. Fantastic. Ivanessa,
Yes.
I see you're off mute too. Go right ahead.
Thank you. You mentioned something about professional services. I'm in the industry of professional services. Small business advisor and tax accountant. So my goal is to be able to focus on helping them develop strategies for growth and development. That's really my goal, because they're lagging on those areas. But you said something about professional services.
I was using that I was using what a make or break key result or KPI might be for a professional service organization, which would be billable utilization a lot of times. But I will tell you, I use this all the time. There is a great free report and benchmark study that is published every year from a company called Financial Force. And it is awesome. It is a very pretty good sample size of a variety of different professional service organizations, from tech-enabled professional service to non-tech, in the various industries, probably tax and account, etc. But anyways, that particular report has an amazing amount of really awesome performance measures, benchmarks by type of organization, benchmarks by maturity, and it's free. So if you just Google Financial Force, like benchmark report, or Financial Force professional services report, you'll find it. And you just have to give your email, of course, but it's free. So you might find that really helpful. I've found it really helpful.
Thank you so much. And another question is, in one of the slides, I saw that the number of clients was blank. I was curious to know why.
Number of clients.
Go back, right before that one. Yes, here. The next one. The next. Right before the one that you showed that said change the conversation from what happened to what's next.
Oh, that right before. Okay, so that's that one. So it was right. So what's happening? What's next?
Go forward.
Forward, yeah, I guess.
Right here?
That one, yes. So.
Oh, yeah.
Is that blank or that's a heading? Because that's
a heading. That's a heading.
Oh, got it.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. It was not. It's my formatting was a little bit screwed up on this, but those are headings.
But that's key for a professional service organization like mine.
Yes, of course it is. No doubt about it. Right. So that's just a heading. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Absolutely. Well, awesome, everybody. Thank you so much. And I think that there's a lot of other stuff to talk about, but I will just say that we will continue the conversation. We will continue the conversation with everybody on the third Thursday. Let's go deeper, because there is a lot to talk about with this. Absolutely. Yeah. So we'll leave it right there, just because it's a little bit of a head spinner, all this goodness. So there's a few questions we'll talk about. And I think we can dig deeper into critical success factors on the third Thursday, as well as really maybe seeing some additional models that people might be using. So if you've got some models that you're using, love to showcase you, just put another plug in there. So with that, everybody, we are going to, I'm seeing you're asking, the report is Financial Force, and it's like Financial Force Professional Services Benchmark or something like that, but it's free. So yeah, I think Financial Force is some sort of financial application, but either way, it's pretty cool. So that would be that. Have an awesome rest of the day, everyone.